Hi everyone. Welcome back to the weekly politics show. I'm Councillor Premier with co-host Councillor Andrew Wood on Relax Radio. So, in the final segment, we're going to talk about the debate that's raging throughout Tower Hamlets, which is on the issue of Israel-Palestine, especially just focusing on the sort of like key ask of many campaigners locally is whether why isn't Tower Hamlets Council raising the Palestinian flag. So before I go into that debate and get Andrew's views on it, I just want to make a statement. So I was involved in raising a banner in Brick Lane on the We Stand With Palestine. Someone wrote a silly comment. I didn't write it. I made it clear on social media that I have nothing to do with that. That comment's going to be taken down. Someone's going to go tonight to basically take it down. But we need to move the discussion forward onto serious issues that we could all agree on, which is international application, international law and human rights, and have a discussion as a way forward instead of guilt by association or standing next to a banner. So I did reach out to Jack Mendel, the editor of the Jewish News, to come down, see the banner, and together, me and him, see if there are any offensive comments. We'll just take them off, and so we could move the debate forward between various communities on issues that we all agree on, which is universal human rights and international law, and move the discussion forward to a more mature debate. But moving on, so statements done. Andrew, do you want to your take on because I know there's strict protocols around the flag issues, and those protocols were changed quite a few years ago after there was another issue around flag raising. So because I know we had a discussion amongst Labour councillors about that, and we were told that the strict flag protocols, which are with the chief executive, Will Tuckley, so it's taken out of as a political football, and the strict requirements to that. Do you want to go through that? With regards to the flag protocols at Tower Hamlets Council?
Yes. So basically, there's a flag pole outside the town hall at Mulberry Place. So it's that flag pole that we're talking about. It's not really visible from the road or anything. So it has more of a symbolic value than anything else. And every now and again, there is pressure about putting up somebody's flag. So, for example, the Tibetan community in London about a month ago sort of suggested that when I think there's a key date in their calendar, they would quite like the Tibetan flag to be put up on that date. And I don't object to that in particular, but I think part of the problem is, there are lots of demands from lots of different people about you must put up our flag on this particular day or for this particular event. But we have no foreign policy responsibility or expertise in the council. And it generally, with the exception of the Chinese embassy, where we did have an interest because it was moving here, I and Councillor Peter Goals, who have always resisted sort of the international debates at Tower Hamlets Council, because that's not what we're elected for. We have no responsibility. And also, we elect 2 local members of parliament. Their responsibility is kind of foreign policy. And also and I really don't want to sort of get us as a community dragged into Middle Eastern politics and some of the hatred and division that brings. I'm quite happy to say in public that, I think the Israeli government have made lots of mistakes and basically are pretty much probably 90 to 95% responsible for what's been happening recently. I think Hamas probably, takes some of the responsibility as well. And I think we have to sort of, accuse both sides of some of these problems as well. But that's just me sort of saying that. And as I said, as a councillor, I have no responsibility for foreign policy. None of our council officers have any, responsibility for that area as well. And I think this is part of the problem is if you agree it for somebody, then you have to agree it for somebody else. And where do you draw the line? And I think because it has happened in the past, I think the council just decided, and this is classic Tower Hamlets Council, just play it safe, nothing controversial, perhaps the English flag on St. George's Day and maybe one other flag on another day, but nothing more than that, because that keeps life simple for the council and doesn't get any accusations of we're favouring one side over another. I know I talked to one other councillor and actually, I'd be quite supportive of the white flag, some kind of peace symbol going up. rather than, a Palestinian flag or something along those lines, just as to commemorate this. But that's the kind of the background and the battle over the flags in the past.
Yeah, and I know the government is changing the laws. I know the current government have sort of like, I don't know whether they brought in those regulations where councils are required to fly the Union Jack most of the time, or something like that. At the moment, it's optional, and they want it flown from every government building, including local authorities. But following on your point about discussing foreign policy, I know the mayor, Mayor John Biggs, in response to one of the campaigners, and the email has been published in social media, said that there's going to be a debate tabled at the next ordinary meeting to discuss the issue. So it seems like Tower Hamlets Council is coming off the fence, so to speak, and discussing foreign policy. So I don't know whether we're going to go towards the way of Sheffield Council, who basically have an office for international human rights to make awareness of, like a council officer, to go around and make people aware of international human rights abuses or other international issues, whether we're going down that route. Andrew, what's your response to the mayor's response to campaigners that there will be a debate at the next ordinary meeting of Tower Hamlets Council, which I think would be July, not the AGM?
So the first problem with that is that actually we have limited time in these meetings, and there's actually a number of really important issues I think that we need to debate, which are local issues. And fire safety, by the way, is probably going to be the main motion from the opposition group. There's a motion that we might want to do about governance and about as a result of the referendum, which we're kind of thinking about and working on. And there's a couple of other sort of major local issues that we need to debate. And the problem is, if you're spending time debating Palestine, then that means we're not dealing with local issues. And at the end of the day, as local councillors, we're elected to deal with local issues. Members of parliament are elected to deal with foreign policy type issues. So yes, it might be very interesting to debate, Israel and Palestine and, some of the causes of the conflict and the mistakes the Israeli government have made. And yes, I can say I definitely agree the Israeli government have not acted correctly or properly and have made the situation much worse. But then I'd also say the same about Hamas as well, and why haven't Fatah had elections? But at the end of the day, that's not our responsibility. And we'd have to explain to residents why, for example, an issue we have no powers over is more important than an issue like fire safety, where we do have some responsibility. And as I said, the Chinese embassy was an exception because the Chinese embassy was moving here. That made it a legitimate point to discuss, but I'm uncomfortable because where do we draw the line? We talked about recognizing Somaliland a few years ago. What do we talk about next? And therefore, that always means that we don't have time to talk about local issues.
Would you be minded, just thinking off my feet, if we had we do have sort of like the right to call an extraordinary meeting where it doesn't impinge on, say, the council agenda, so to speak, where if residents do want elected councillors to take a view, we could have that discussion there, and also what constructive things we can ask the government to do, or what we can do as a local authority to have much more of a constructive rather than blanket condemnation or blanket support. What can we do as a local authority? Should we set up a human rights office or to go around schools just basically talking about international law and universal human rights and how people could campaign, work with Amnesty International, for example, do an education program with them, something constructive and sustainable rather than say something heat of the moment? What can we ask the government in Whitehall to do? So one of the things I've looked at is even to this day, parliamentary law is still applied in the occupied territory. So laws passed by the British authorities applied, and they're quite draconian. Lack of human rights. Now, sovereignty of parliament extends all over the world, but Parliament can revoke those laws, and there's been precedent where I think in the 1950s, they granted sovereignty to America, saying the laws, UK laws, no longer applied. Should we do the same thing in the UK, saying, look, these laws no longer apply, they cannot be used against civilian populations, they were there for a specific reason. We might agree or disagree why they were brought in, but they shouldn't be applied in the 21st century. So those kind of constructive things, I'll rather look forward to something sustainable rather than blanket condemnation kind of ish and feeling good about ourselves. But it's something to look at up and coming. I know we're going to have discussions amongst Labour councillors. We're going to have discussions cross-party as well, to actually, how do we constructively take the energy that's there or the concerns that's there and create sustainable outcomes, rather than what I feel has happened in the past is just people taking pictures and posting up. By the way, that banner was just there to raise awareness, guys. But cool. But Andrew, any final thoughts before we end the show, so to speak?
I'm happy to have a debate sort of separate from a council meeting in the same way that we're talking tonight, sort of in our free time, long as it sort of doesn't involve too much in the way of council resources. As politicians, we are allowed to say what we think about these issues and debate them as well. But I just don't think it's a local authority issue sort of directly, because that's very clearly responsibility of Parliament, and we have to sort of focus on local stuff, because there's lots of really important issues that we need to be talking about locally as well over the next year.
No, definitely. Well, let's see how it develops. I know Mayor John Biggs said that he reads everything I write or watches everything we do, including Andrew's tweets as well. I know they're quite popular among certain circles. So let's see what happens from this discussion. So we're at the end of the program. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for the weekly politics show. Join us next week, same time, Friday, 7 p.m.